Good morning, Mike. I had one of those inflatable hot tubs.
Did you?
Checked it on the tip. No point putting that one on. I can't afford to run it.
That's the thing. You know, either the water's too expensive or the electricity's too expensive. So I imagine loads of people are doing just exactly what you've done, and there's no time like the present to do it. Couple of big questions, I guess, to kick off with. Obviously, the cost of living is on everybody's mind. Liz Truss says that we can ride out the storm together. She's hinted that she's going to be giving us some kind of freeze on energy prices. But the key thing, really, for me, is where is she going to put that freeze at? And how do we know, and when will we find out where that freeze comes?
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Then. So I think she's talking about making a big announcement tomorrow. So I think people have been working behind the scenes on what this might be. And basically, there's a few different ways this could be done. So the Chancellor, Richie Sunak, in the past, had already announced a big kind of package of measures to give people some money in the autumn. But obviously, the energy cap's going to be much higher than that. I think Keir Starmer coming out saying he would freeze energy bills. We're not far off, Mike, maybe 2 years away, but it's not far, really, when you start thinking of the back end of this winter from the next general election. So I think Liz Truss is probably going to do what we would call an energy freeze for everybody. Reason for that is people have got kind of memories and they'll think, oh, well, the Labour would have looked after me with all of my bills. So there's some rumours this morning that she's going to cap it at around £2,500. So at the moment, the energy cap is £1,971. Let me just explain what the cap is. It's not that's the top cap on your bill. What it means is a typical family would pay that, but what the cap actually is, Mike, it puts a limit on the kind of the amount per unit that you pay. It does vary across the country as well, and also a limit on that kind of daily stand-in charge that you pay to have access to the national grid. Now, we know that the richest households, they use more energy, they've got bigger houses than the smaller households, so an actual cap itself would benefit the richest households. But I've been looking at the numbers over the weekend, Mike. We've got 3 million of the poorest households at the moment because of the high inflation over the last year. It's been obviously it's about 10% now, much higher than what benefits have gone up. And the poorest households rely on benefits. They're actually skint at the moment. They've run out of money. So before we even get to October, they cannot pay their energy bills. Now, every other household, when you look at the income deciles, you look at the 20th to the 30th to the 40th, all the way to the richest, you actually find that most of those households do have enough money to pay the increased bills that are coming, but nobody wants to be paying bills. So I've worked out, and I think there's a graphic come up on the screen now, and those who listen on the radio, basically it's just how much it would cost to freeze energy prices at the April cap every single month, using the current forecast wholesale prices to the next general election. Now, the general election will be the end of 2024, is the latest we could probably get it. So it's going to be about 40 billion, Mike, for households only, just to freeze it through the winter, so that's for the end of March. And then the wholesale price is going to go up every 3 months. And then if we carry on going all the way to the end of 2024, we could have a bill of about £250 billion. Now, the furlough scheme, for context, costs £70 billion. The cost in the out years will depend on where the wholesale price does go. But what this actually shows, Mike, is, the furlough scheme costs an absolute fortune. We've talked about that in the past. This is a massive transfer of wealth.
Yeah, this is 3 or 4 times that. But is the wholesale price going to go up continually? Because it may not. I mean, the wholesale price of oil, for example, has not actually increased more than it was some years ago. In fact, 14 years ago or so, I think it was even more expensive than it is now. So it's not just the wholesale price we have to worry about, is it?
No, but the forecasters are saying it's going to go up. But we do know forecasters can sometimes put some doom and gloom. But remember, this isn't just about the Ukraine war. I know politicians come on and say we're all paying because of the Ukraine war. A big part of this, Mike, is we've got COP27 coming up in November, so save that one for the diary. I'm sure you'll be covering that one, ecstatically, Mike. That will be coming up. We know more and more countries across the world are looking to use more gas. So the demand for gas is going up because it's a cleaner form of energy. So the world's demand has gone up, and so the outlook in the future years, especially with Russia limiting the supply, obviously, to Europe, that's going to have a kind of upward pressure. So if we see these forecast prices, Mike, we are looking about 250 billion, even if they don't go up at all, though, Mike. So let's just assume the cap stays exactly what it goes in at October. It doesn't go up at all, and in the future, that's still a bill of 100 billion. And remember now, Mike, this is the bill for households only. You just talked about businesses.
Businesses have no cap at all, do they?
No, it doesn't help businesses at all. And remember, Richie Sunak keeps talking about inflation's the enemy, Mike. Well, let's just run through inflation. So 2/3 of inflation is currently driven by the energy prices, fuel prices, food prices. But anything that uses energy will have increased inflation, because if you make food with energy, everything that's got energy linked to it transport, manufacturing, everything's going to go up. So, what these businesses will have to do, Mike, is increase their prices. So the only way you can control inflation, it's not the Bank of England. They're talking nonsense. The people are saying, raise interest rates. What you need to do is sort the energy security, energy problem, and I think that's the biggest thing.
But let's get back, Jamie, because I'm keen to get back to the actual price for people and what they're paying, because you can tell people till they're blue in the face, or until you're blue in the face, or even I am, how much it's going to cost the government, because, of course, we're going to end up having to pay that. But in the short term, people don't care, really. They want to know what it is that it's going to cost them. So at the moment, the price per kilowatt, in terms of what it's going to go up to in October, is she going to freeze the price at what it is now? Is that what you're saying?
That's what people have said. That's what Keir Starmer would do, is freeze it. We've already seen big increases, Mike, from April 2022 just gone. We've already seen a big increase. So the current cap, if you just say take the typical family, that's about £1,971. So some people pay less, some people pay more. Tends to be the poorer you are, you do tend to pay less, Mike, just because you use less energy, because you've got smaller homes and then the larger homes. Now, she's talking about increasing potentially the cap to 2,500. That would be lower than the 3,500 that it would go to, so there would be some saving for households there. But remember, Mike, we do use more energy in the winter, and even at £2,500, that's 2.5 times what we were paying last winter. Yeah. So it's easy, Mike, me and you could be running the government today. It's easy to go and promise £100 billion, £200 billion giveaway. Remember, this isn't the government's money, it's our money, and ultimately we will have to pay this back. It's a bit like me going and saying to you, Mike, I'm going to give you a load of money and putting it on a credit card, but you're still paying the credit card, Mike, over the next 20 years. Right,
even though you might not be actually spending the money. That's the difficult part, isn't it? We're going to talk about a few of the other things that she's going to do, but in terms of the wholesale energy price and the way that you've looked at the way that that's gone, I mean, are you saying it's driven largely just by demand rather than it is by a shortage of supply?
There's both factors at play, Mike, but everybody's talking about the shortage of supply. Remember, we didn't rely on Russia much for our gas. It was about 3%. That's practically kind of removed now. What we've seen over the last 40 years is this big curtailment of the use of coal. In 2021, we used 40% of our electricity came from gas. And for the first time, most of that gas came from overseas, because we have, ironically, Mike, been incentivising the North Sea to cut its production of gas. Now, renewables have come in a bit higher, but we're now relying on the foreign gas markets more than we have in the past, and that's a big factor in what we've got. Then you've got other countries across the world looking to get some of that liquefied natural gas shipped in, because they're looking for cleaner energy because of the COP26 agreements that have been signed up. So the demand from gas has come up. We've got curtailed supplies, a vicious storm, and renewables are a good way forward. If you took Norway, Mike, nearly 100% of all Norway's electricity comes from renewables, ironically, Mike, from mainly reservoirs, which we haven't been building much in the UK, if at all, for 30 years. So there are ways where you can have clean energy, where you can build a load of reservoirs, sort the water supply out, use the reservoirs like we used to do back in the day with water for the water mills. She's talking yesterday, Mike, Liz Truss, about digging spades in the ground. I think infrastructure is a good way of investing. It creates jobs, but it also creates assets that the government can use for society.
Well, it does, because what successive governments have done for too long, in my opinion, is they've completely sort of allowed the infrastructure of this country to crumble, and they haven't put in, as you say, reservoirs. They haven't built an energy free zone. They haven't made it possible for us to be self-sufficient on energy or given us any energy security. We haven't got a manufacturing base worth of fag end. It all needs to be done, and it needs to be done pretty damn quick. We'll talk about what else she needs to do, because she's coming out, obviously, after the first time of making a speech outside of Downing Street. She's going to Prime Minister's questions today. Hopefully, Sir Keir Starmer will pin her down on precisely what she's going to do. We shall see. We'll bring you that live right here on Talk TV, of course. Coming next, more from Jamie Jenkins to Talk TV. Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. How about this from Victor, who says, my best mate bought a hot tub in lockdown, and as it has to be left on, it's costing him an absolute fortune. We just heard Jamie Jenkins said he chucked his one on the tip a few weeks ago. You tell us what you've done with yours. Have you turned it into a giant bird bath? Have you turned it into a sort of a lake for something or other else? Have you put your kids in it as a swimming pool? Who knows what you can do with it? But we're going to find out today from Liz Truss precisely what you can look forward to. We just talked to Jamie Jenkins about how much we're going to be paying for the electricity and the gas that we get inside the house. Let's talk now about what she can do with the NHS, because you've got some interesting stats, Jamie, on what state the NHS is currently in.
Yeah, and there's no simple way of saying it. Just one hell of a state, I think, Mike,
Yes.
is the problem, because I think we've seen these record waiting lists. They haven't been helped, obviously, by the COVID pandemic and kind of having a national COVID service. But remember, you know, people who are in pain, waiting for hip operations, eye operations, feel for them. We need to sort that out. But the state of the NHS at the moment is actually causing people to die right this minute, actually, Mike. I'll just quickly talk you through. So we have been seeing these excess deaths across the country for the last 3 or 4 months, and they are at a time where the NHS is in a bit of a crisis. So a couple of things here, Mike. So I think what the graphic's showing on the screen, and for those listening on the radio, is basically how many deaths we're seeing across the country each week, which is orange bars. And what you'd expect to see is, if death rates were the same as pre-pandemic, is shown by kind of the white line there. And we've been seeing over and above excess deaths now for a while across the country. And this isn't just COVID, Mike. If you take COVID out, because we did have a mini wave of COVID, we're still seeing this excess deaths. Now, ambulance response times, that's the big issue at the moment. So in July, for those category 1 calls, so they're those most life-threatening emergency calls, you know, if you've had a heart attack, something that you need to get to the patient really quick. They have a target, an average target of getting to the patient within 8 minutes. And in July, it was 9 minutes 35. Now, you might think, oh, well, 8 minutes, 9 minutes 35, it's not a much time difference. But those calls, Mike, they make a difference. Those seconds do make a difference. People then go and get into an ambulance as well. They're turning up at the A&E. Some patients, they can't get put into the hospital because there's not enough beds in the A&E. And one of the reasons for that is because there's patients in the wider hospital, Mike, who can be discharged, they fit, but we don't have enough care workers. So there's about 100,000 care workers shortfall. Now, Trust needs to plan again, not just on infrastructure for the long term. We've got an ageing population. We're going to need at least another 500,000 care workers over the next 10 years, Mike. Jeremy Hunt came in 2016. Well, sorry, he's in before that, but he was promising us in 2016, I'll sort you out more doctors, GPs. We've got fewer GPs now, Mike, than we had in 2016. So Trust can talk the talk. She's got to do the walk, because
that's the thing.
People are dying, Mike, because of this.
We've got 1.5 million people who haven't got a GP, and because so many GPs have walked off the job, so many GPs have just given up and decided to do something else because they can make more money doing something else. So it's a really awful state of affairs. But, you know, in terms of what she can do that has an immediate effect. I mean, the ambulance problem, for example, she could fix that, presumably quickest, if she just decided to do so. Because we hear stories every week, don't we, of people waiting, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours, people being told we don't have an ambulance. It's not so much the fact that they're hitting the targets if they can and only missing them by a minute. It's the fact that an awful lot of people are having to get themselves to hospital.
Yeah, indeed, Mark. I think the care, it kind of shows the disjointed nature of the whole health and care system, because, you know, to fix part of the ambulance problem, you wouldn't think it's solved by getting more care workers in the community. You think, well, what's the link there? It's in part because if you've got, we do know, Mike, the chance of dying by the time you go in, so you've got on an ambulance and then there's a delay in getting you into the hospital, not just those life-threatening calls, but you might be sat on an ambulance outside, can't get put into the hospital because you're waiting for that bed. So remember, that ambulance has got you on the kind of on the trolley outside in the ambulance. That can't be used for another call as well. So tackling the care issue, sorting the GPs out. You can't just make a GP overnight, Mike. That's the problem. We do need some long-term planning here. But I think what it's showing is successive government policy over the last 10 or 12 years clearly is showing that people are dying because the NHS is not fit for purpose. Now, we do know we've got another 100,000 vacancies in the NHS as well, Mike, they're saying. We've got to stop. This is one of the immediate things you can do. You know, I've been on, you go on the NHS jobs website any week, you'll see more managerial roles for diversity and inclusion managers. Now, obviously, diversity and inclusion is important in any business, but we don't need to make an industry of this by 6-figure salaries, where those salaries could be going to training more and more doctors. We need more frontline staff. That's where she needs to be focusing on the NHS, because it's the hard facts of them. Like, we can talk about how poor or good the NHS is, the facts are there. People are dying now because the NHS is not delivering the service.
No, of course. Boris Johnson, though, in his farewell speech, went on about all the extra nurses that they were hiring. You know, there's still this mantra of nonsense inside the government where they say, oh, yeah, but we're building more hospitals, we're hiring more nurses. Well, when? You know, we're not seeing the change that they said they would bring, because the point is that this is needed now. It's not needed in 6 months, it's not needed in 2 years, it's not needed in 2050. You know, they're still working on net zero in the NHS for 2030 or something ridiculous. All these sustainability people. Let's talk about the migrants next, because that's the other big issue that so many people are wound up about, worked up about, particularly people who watch this station, people who listen to this station. It's the biggest issue for them past the cost of living. You're saying that we're on course for about 65,000 illegal migrants coming here this year.
Yeah, if you take the August figures, Mike, we were like over 2.5 times the number we saw last August, and all through the year we've been seeing more migrants across the country than any year. So the graph on the screen is just plotting basically how many we saw coming since 2018 over the channel and across in the small boats. And in 2018 there was about 299. There was very few coming, and every year it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in 2022 now, if we continue with the trend, Mike, that we're seeing over in what we saw last year, we're in 65,000 kind of channel migrants coming across. Now, the cost of this is the accommodation costs are astronomical in a way, because you've got the costs were estimated around 5 million a day back in February. Well, the total numbers have gone up considerable since then. So it should be at least around 10 million a day, which is about £3.5 billion. That's just the cost of the accommodation. You then have obviously they get free health care, free dental care, obviously an allowance to buy things. You know, you can't begrudge people, they need to live. You know, we're not a nation of horrible people, but it does cost money now. And the thing, Mike, when you do look at the figures now, so the Home Office every quarter give us some information on kind of the nationality of all these. We're always told, aren't we, they're fleeing wars, persecution, but Albanian nationals now are the majority of what we're seeing when you look at it by nationality. And we haven't had a war over there. So we've got a question, basically, Mike, and I looked at the figures this morning, and about 46% of applications from Albanians in 2021 were accepted. So, you know, they are coming over, they are getting accepted through the system. But a big factor, Mike, which Liz Truss and the new Home Secretary needs to sort out, is the civil service and the delay. 70% of asylum applications at the moment, end of June, have been waiting over 6 months for a decision. So if you don't sort that out, that's where it costs the taxpayer a lot of money, Mike.
Yeah, but the problem is the people coming illegally from Albania now are likely to be people who have already been deported once, and they can't come back legally, so they have to come back the illegal route. And what we also know from a story in July, which I was shown yesterday, funnily enough, there was a massive smuggling ring busted open, which was bringing people through Turkey, and including the boats as well, all the way through Europe, into Calais, and then into Britain. And they were arresting people in London, they're in parts of Manchester, people who are part of a people smuggling ring. I can't get my head around the fact that do-gooders in this country say, oh, but these are people fleeing war zones. They're criminals. So many of them are criminals, and it's ridiculous that we can't just say that without being accused of some kind of ridiculous racism, you know?
Yeah, and it's only the last year or so, Mike, that the Albanian nationals have taken over as the lead nationality of what we got. So as the numbers are shooting up dramatically, the numbers of Albanians are shooting up dramatically as well. And you're right, there's no way that they're all coming over. Some people, I heard a debate, I think, on a show a few weeks back, and they were saying that, you know, these people need jobs, they're coming here for jobs. Well, that's not what the asylum system is for. You know, that's economic migration, which is not what the asylum system is for. And no doubt, Mike, you've got a lot of these people, they come over. I've seen images, Mike, of boats that are landing as well, and they're not being picked up. No. People are just landing on the beaches and just going off into the community.
It's a massively successful operation. You know, it's more successful than anything else that has ever been the case in this country at the moment in 2022. It's the only thing that works. It's amazing. Jeremy Jenkins, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. A lot of interesting information to digest there.